there are facts exist in intersubjective space, right? So if I tell you, well, this glass, this isn't just an ordinary glass. I know it looks just like that one, but this is the glass that Elton John drank from in his last concert here, right?
Right.
So, what do you want to pay me for it, right?
Right.
It could be that, you're just the biggest Elton John fan ever, and it's worth quite a lot to you. Now it's a kind of evident, it's not value intrinsic to the glass, but
right.
it is a...
Where's the value located?
Well, it's a measure in the change this provokes in your experience, right? Just the idea. I mean, we value ideas as much as anything else, and that's hence the mad work done by religion, right? I mean, because these aren't facts on the ground. These are ideas that rule people's lives. I mean, people spend their whole life afraid of hell.
Okay,
right?
It seems to me that it's easier in some sense, rather than to relate the value of that. And I love the Elton John's glass example. I was going to use Elvis Presley's guitar.
It's here. I will tell it to you.
It's like, where in the guitar is the fact that it's Elvis Presley's guitar? Well, it's nowhere in the guitar. Well, what is it in? Where is it then? And the answer is, it's in the dominance hierarchy of values that's been socially constructed around the guitar. It's located in interpersonal space. And that location, so value is located in interpersonal space. And if you want to say, well, that's also a fact, it's like, okay, but we're starting to stretch
it's a fact
the
about the beliefs and desires and conscious states of all the people involved.
Okay,
right?
well,
that's the only place where it exists. That's the only place where the idea of Elvis's guitar can show up.
Okay, well, I'm trying to figure out then, you see, because what seems to me to be happening, at least in part, is that we can stretch the domain of what constitutes a fact so that the domain of facts starts to incorporate the domain of values. But we do that with doing some damage to the domain of facts.
No,
well,
not
hang on. Don't just say no. This is really.
I'll say more.
This is really complicated because you see, part of what the postmodernists have done is that they've pushed away the domain of facts entirely, and they say, well, the only thing is that the only thing that actually exists is this domain of intersubjective agreement. And they,
you and I are on the same page with respect to postmodernism.
Right, but you have to give the devil his due as well. They pointed out something, and what they pointed out is that it's not so easy to localize the structure that attributes to facts their value. It's not a simple thing.
Now, wait.
Yes.
You would surely agree that if we had Elvis Presley's guitar, that guitar would have a material impact on people. We could tell them, this is Elvis Presley's guitar. Some fraction of them would disbelieve it. Somebody might be able to establish it based on a picture or something like that. And the point is, it would have a value that would alter the behavior of people with respect to that object in a material way.
Yes, it would alter the behavior of the people.
So the value could be manifest in physical space.
Which part of it? The
behavior?
We
could detect it. We could figure out what the value of this guitar is based on some intersection
between... Sure, we could take a behaviorist approach and we could see how much work people were willing to do to make contact with the guitar.
We can scan their brains and see what...
I'm not so sure we can do that.
Well, clearly the brain is involved.
Hypothetically we can do it, but practically we're not so good at it. Because the MRI data, generally speaking, is junk.
Well, we can table that.
That
will be a profoundly controversial statement in MRI circles.
Fair enough.
I don't think we need it. We
don't need it, but
we know
let's go with
that a market will establish the value of the guitar.
The brain, as yet incompletely understood, is surely involved in the valuing of this object, right? And so if I tell you that this is, and again, we can take it out of intersubjective space because you could be in a value solitude with respect to any given object. So it could just be, you could have a sentimental attachment to your watch that's worth exactly $25 because that's what you paid for it, but this is the watch that, this is your first watch or whatever it is, and you wouldn't sell it for any amount of money.
Right.
That's a measure of a behavioral measure of how much you value it. And if I told you, oh, well, sorry, I borrowed your watch and lost it, what the cascade of negative affect that I see on your face is correlated with something that's happening in your head, and the brain is involved, right? So the totality of that picture
what you're basically stating,
is the value.
As far as I can tell, is that there'd be a socio-cultural agreement as to the value of whatever this entity is, and that would find its mirror in the brain. And that's a non-controversial statement because all socio-cultural phenomena that are experienced find their reflection in the brain. The fact that you can say that that's reflected in the brain, it's like,
right,
yes,
but the
I
problem
don't
we continually run into with religion is that you have a domain of so-called sacred values where people who are otherwise rational cease to be rational actors. So this is the reason why Israel and the Israelis and the Palestinians can't negotiate as though their problems could be solved by a real estate transaction is because they have irrational and irreconcilable claims upon land and buildings.
Do you think they're any
Actually,
more?
I don't
Do you
think
think
you know
they're any
that.
more irrational than the claim that that glass is worth something more?
Well, no, it's
because
just
it was near-
it's
because it was
like
near
that.
Elton?
It's like that. But I'm
But
saying
that's not irrational by your own definition. You just said that that was actually constituted a fact.
well,
And
no,
so
it's a fact about people, right? So there are. This is okay.
Okay.
Should be a little careful here
Yep,
because
yep.
it gets confusing.
Yep.
We can make objective claims about subjective experience, right? We use this word objective and subjective in different ways. We use it in epistemological ways and ontological ways. And
give me just 1 sec to make sure I'm on the same page as you.
Well, so I can illustrate by way of example. If I say that that's just your subjective opinion, right? I'm denigrating. I'm saying that this is an expression of your bias. This is true for you, but it's not true out in the world, right? That's one way I can use the subjective objective distinction, and that's an epistemological way. Like you're ruled by bias. You're not thinking straight. I don't have to take your opinion seriously. That's subjective. I'm worried about objective facts. But people get confused. They think that objective facts only means the material world and what's really in this glass as a material object. No, we can be much more objective than that. We can make objective claims about the subjective experience of people like ourselves. I can make an infinite number of objective claims about the experience. This is the example I always use, but I just happen to love it. What was JFK thinking the moment he got shot? Right? Now that's it. We don't know, so we'll never get the data. Right? So the truth or falseness of what I'm about to say can't be predicated on actually getting access to the data because he's not around and his brain's not around to scan. But you and I both know an infinite number of things he wasn't thinking about. We can make an objective claim about his subjectivity. I know he wasn't thinking, well, I hope Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris work it out on stage that night. Right? And an infinite number of things like that. He was thinking something, he was experiencing something, but we don't know what it is. So when I'm talking about this domain of value, I'm saying that it exists in this landscape of actual and possible conscious experience for human beings and any other system like us that can experience this range of suffering and happiness.
Well, okay, so and partly what I'm trying to do is to actually determine what that structure is.
Well, in our case, it's certainly connected to the evolved structure of our brain.
Yeah, but I want to go way deeper into the brain.
It's augmented by everything else we do.
I want to go way deeper into the idea than it's connected with brain states, because it's definitely connected with brain states. The question is, at least in part, how and what does that mean? And I think that the neuroscience has progressed far enough so that we can do quite a good job of this. And so, but I want to return to one thing, and maybe I'll outline a little bit of this. And when you talked about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you said that was irrational. And so, look, fair enough. People have been locked with their hands around each other's necks there for 3,000 years. But there's a problem there. And the problem is that people are looking at the landscape from a contextualized perspective, right? It's not just a piece of land, it's their piece of land. It's like your house or maybe your favorite shirt. It's like, well, you say, well, I have a favorite shirt. It's like, well, there's nothing inherent in the shirt that makes it your favorite. No, it's a subjective judgment. It's like, well, then is that a fact? Well, yes, it's a fact. It's a fact about subjective judgment. It's okay. Well, the Israeli claim on the land and the Palestinian claim on the land is a subjective judgment that's a fact.
Yeah,
it's like, so how is it irrational?
Because it is the true analogy here, the complete analogy is rather like we're about to fight over Elton John's glass, and Elton John was never here, right?
Well,
so I'm not saying so. It clearly still matters to us in our misapprehension of our situation. We still really care, and these are objectively true claims about the level at which we value things. and hence the impasse.
Well,
but it matters
I
if
think that's counterproductively dismissive. Like you could say, well,
it's really not. When you look at the specific claims, it's really not.
Look, you took the contextual interpretation to its absolute extreme. You said, well, there's multiple reasons why different people who occupy the same piece of land are going to feel about it in different ways.
Sure.
Okay, and
most of those reasons are amenable to some kind of rational compromise.
Well,
there's studies on this. I mean, there's studies done by people who I disagree with.
When you say the word rational in that context, you're using it as a black box that contains the concept, proper way of thinking about it. It's like it's not so obvious in most situations what the rational approach is.
Well,
otherwise, life would be very, very simple.
I have an obvious one here, and that's that whatever the Christians and the Muslims and the Jews think they're getting from their attachment to their dogmatic and irreconcilable religious worldviews can be gotten just as well by a deeper understanding of our universal and non-culturally bound capacity for ethical experience, spiritual experience, community building, and we can touch that space.
What's that grounded in?
We can touch that space it's almost like the status quo it's almost like you're content to live in a world, or at least you're content not to judge too harshly a world where fans of rival soccer teams or baseball teams regularly kill one another over their fandom, right? Like what if that were the status quo? It's like it's been this way for thousands of years. There must be a reason for it.
Look,
people really like sports.
I'm not trying to justify the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
No, but
I'm saying that
we shouldn't be too quick to judge the sanctity of their differences of opinion.
Okay, but wait a minute, Sam. There, you made a claim. Your claim was that if the Christians and the Jews and the Muslims would just stop their stupidity and adopt this universal ethic, then everything would be okay. It's like, okay, what's the basis for the universal ethic? Like that's such.
That's a non-problem. No one's going in search of that. The truth is, I mean, that's an interesting problem for philosophers and for scientists. That's not actually where the rubber meets the road for people living their lives well. I mean, this is analogous to me.
Sure it is. It's associated in your book with the difference between the bad and the good life.
I really care about all of this, and my job as a philosopher, as a moral philosopher in that case, is to make the best case I can for these ideas. But the truth is, I mean, it is analogous to when you get into a debate with a Christian fundamentalist in the States. Very often, this person will pretend to care about cosmology or evolution as though it's the most important thing in the world, as though you can't get out of bed in the morning and figure out how to treat your friends and family well unless you figure out what happened before the Big Bang, right? No one really lives their lives that way, and yet we have convinced ourselves that this is a sensible way of talking about the conflict between religion and science.
So hold on. I think you have arrived at the core of your conflict right here, and I actually hear you both loud and clear. Your point is that if the people faced with the question were to, start with a fresh sheet of paper, look at the Middle East, they could arrive at a compromise that they as individuals might find put them way ahead and is more profitable than the situation that they are continually finding themselves in.
Yeah.
And that might be the case. On the other hand, the reason that they don't is that historically those who have been outcompeted by those who haven't. So the point is, the universe and the fact that it refuses to solve that conflict is telling us that there is some reason that people who take that prospect seriously are not actually correct in some at least metaphorical way. So in other words, what is it to have a sentimental attachment to some piece of territory somewhere? That sounds completely irrational. On the other hand, that sentimental attachment may result in you continuing for 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 years, whereas if you surrendered it because it was irrational, you might go extinct. Now, should you care that your lineage is going to go extinct? Maybe, arguably not. On the other hand, it's hard to imagine that what you're saying is so thoroughly grounded that it can justify causing people to alter their perspective on value in such a way that it might actually drive them extinct. It's not clear that that's a good
clearly,
thing.
I mean, secularism, we're talking about the fringe here. We're talking about, when you're talking about, in this case, the Israeli settlers and the Palestinian terrorists, right? Like we should all breathe a sigh of relief that kind of passion and attachment to land doesn't characterize most of humanity.